Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be back in Guatemala, and I'm so honored to have these amazing people representing Burning Man to talk about Burning Man and the Burning Man 10 principles with us today. There's a fantastic professor, Robert Wolcott, who talks a lot about principle-based leadership. And the idea is that principles aren't necessarily 10 commandments that have to be followed. Principles are more like kites that pull you forward, that give you direction. So you don't have to follow a direct line, but they lead you in a way that you need to go playfully, and a way that allows you to pivot and make changes and even redefine what those are as you get more information. But like the Polaris North Star, they keep you on the right track. And Burning Man has 10 principles, which hopefully they will put up. We had a slide. And they are not only prescriptive on how they want people to think and feel as they're at Burning Man, but they're also descriptive. When they were created, they were describing the things at Burning Man that worked and that made them successful as they came forward. So my first question for Justin Katz. Justin is an amazing person that does all the events outside of Black Rock City. And so Justin, when we're in Black Rock City, what do the Burning Man principles look like? How do they manifest themselves in the Burning Man events?
I think the beautiful thing about the principles in practice in Black Rock City, Burning Man, is that it's a system of how we treat each other, how we relate to each other, how we show up as our best selves, that whether or not you know what these principles are, you're experiencing them in practice. So some of them may be something you know concretely, like you understand there's a principle of gifting, so you're prepared to share some kind of experience or gift freely. But there may also, at the same time, be principles that you are participating in without even needing to speak about it. Things like communal effort, things like just civic responsibility. These are the practices that are embodied by the way that we choose to be together, and are reflected in that kind of experience that we want and co-create. So it's a beautiful system of principles that can be visible or invisible and still have a deep impact on us.
Did anyone else want to share how they see the principles manifesting in Burning Man? Or?
I think what's hard about maybe that question is that there are so many ways, but I think maybe one quick example is that oftentimes at Burning Man we make decisions that are cultural or principle decisions that don't make a lot of sense in a profit or efficiency mode. And so with our event, when it actually happens, we have over 7,000 volunteers who help us put our event together. Which means there's a massive amount of training each year, getting people into these roles. And I think that if you were looking at the organization from just an efficiency point of view, you would say, well, you could just hire some people, and this would be a much easier way to do that, and it wouldn't be so laborious. But for us, kind of with this principle of radical inclusion, participation, civic responsibility, it actually makes more sense for us to have more people involved, because that actually makes people feel empowered and they have ownership over the culture. And so I think that's one way that I see the principles involved.
So sometimes when people look at the principles, they seem not really to conflict, but there's definitely a dynamic tension. For example, there's radical self-reliance, but at the same time there's communality. But that dynamic tension also gives flexibility and really makes it more three-dimensional. Did you want to discuss that a little bit further? And how does that work? And how does that factor into management and how that might work in people's lives outside of Burning Man?
Yeah, so I think what you're pointing to, Kat, is that oftentimes if you look at our principles in a list, some of them can seem diametrically opposed or opposite. And for me, two of those are radical self-reliance, which means that, really I'm going to be in charge of my own experience, and then also communal effort. which means like, kind of the group participating. And so what you find is that we say you can't just choose one principle, you need all 10. And for me, I imagine kind of like this rubber band being stretched between all 10 of those principles. And oftentimes what we're trying to shoot for is where that dynamic tension is in the middle of those principles being stretched apart. And that's how we try and make most of our decisions in our organization about how to move forward, is really looking at if we apply all of these concepts together, what is the clear path to the middle? And that's actually, for me, what creates tension, and to me, that's actually what creates living culture. Because there is no clear answer. We need to engage in a philosophical conversation about how we might arrive at the decision. And so that also means that all of us are creating the culture by having that discussion together.
Yes, I would like to share with you my experience of being at Burning Man for the first time, which was less than a month ago. And this is something that I wanted to do since a long time ago, and it was until this year that I could finally make it. And people now, when they see me, and the first question is, how was Burning Man? And I have to say that it's a great experiment to prove yourself in a non-familiar environment in many ways. But having read about Burning Man before going and being like studying their principles, I think this is a fantastic way of navigating the future, because what you see now in Burning Man is the result of many years, of achievables and and challenges, and what I see is that there is like an explosion of creativity at Burning Man. And when I ask myself why Burning Man is such a fertile soil for creativity, I think it has to do with some of these principles. And I want to focus, especially me being Guatemalan and living in Guatemala, I want to focus in number one principle, which is radical inclusion. It's easier to say, we are inclusive, we love diversity, than actually living diversity. And I think that if we want to grow as human beings, we definitely need to be more open. And to be more open means to be more open to things that we don't know, things that are not familiar, things that might look, weird or odd or strange. And instead of judging them, looking at them with curious eyes. And I think that's a fantastic thing. To me, that's probably one of the biggest lessons that I had, that being surrounded by almost 70,000 people with this strong expressivity, which I love, also coming from Guatemala, where we tend to be, more reserved and traditional, and being exposed to all this openness, it made me feel free. And the good thing about freedom is that when we feel free, it's easier to become a better version of ourselves. So now that I came back from Burning Man and we have been, making these strong relationships with part of the team of Burning Man, I think that our challenge in Volcano is to come up in the next weeks to work very intensely on our own declaration of principles as a way to have this North Star, that can guide us through the good times, but especially through the hard times.
That was beautiful, thank you. One of the things, absolutely. Burning Man's a lot of things, and it is a lot of things also depending on who you are and what you show up with. It is, by all standards, an amazing art exhibit. Miles and miles of insane sculptures and lights and beautiful experiences. At the same time, it's a social experiment in many ways. For 1 week, there's no money and there's no bartering. If you go into a bar, you smile, you ask politely, they gift you drinks. People gift you food, people gift you, every camp is giving something. They may fix your bicycle, they may wash your hair, they may give you a massage. It's amazing when you have 70, 80,000 people all coming together to give something and to share, and in many ways, to be the best, most authentic, in a safe environment person that they are. You can show up with radical self-expression in a safe space where you also have radical inclusion, where people accept that. And just as you learn how to play piano or guitar, you have muscle memory. How fabulous is it that you get 1 week every year of muscle memory of being the best version of yourself you can be, and maybe even trying on different versions of the best you can be of yourself. And doing it in a safe, inclusive space is the most incredible magic that I've ever experienced. Is why I go back and I thank these amazing people that come together and really make it happen. So part of that is, how do we take the Burning Man principles, the experience, and how do we take that into our lives? How does that affect how we see the world? How does it affect our business? And so I take it to Patric. Do you want to explain how you take these into what we call the default world, the outside of Burning Man?
Yeah, thank you. So just tell some experience of how I start embracing those 10 principles in my personal life and how I got there. So my first time I participated 12 years ago, I'm trained as an engineer. My whole career is data-driven marketing. And I come there, not completely voluntarily, but someone told me I have to go there, so I went. And it looked like total chaos, complete chaos to me. For an engineer, it's total chaos, you come there. But then I start realizing inspiration and innovation lives really on the edge of chaos. That applies for personal life, that applies for business. So inspiration, innovation, it's at the edge of chaos. How do you live that edge of chaos, and what do you do there? And so what became for me, my guiding principle out of the 10 is the principle number 10, immediacy. And immediacy is more than just live in the moment. Immediacy is about finding your inner self by being willing and accepted to do anything right now, right here. Inspiration for yourself, but also find the inspiration of another person. When Emilio comes to me and say, hey Patric, I have this idea. And rather than me as an engineer think it through, I would say, let's do it. And that same is for a culture or for a community. Let's do this. So in a business example, a couple of years after I joined, I worked at Microsoft, and so they asked me, I was an individual contributor, not a manager or anything. Hey Patric, we just acquired this product, and we have a revenue of 2 million a year now. Make a business plan that in 5 years, this is 300 million. And rather than as an engineer start thinking, I was like, okay, I'll do that. Like later I thought, like, holy moly, why did I just say that I'm gonna do that? I committed myself way over my head, right? But I knew there's a community behind that. On a very personal part of this event, I was asked here to participate, and then at the very last moment, what was it, just a few days ago, asked like, hey, can you also do a tango class? I'm like, sure. And I had no idea what I put myself into, but yeah, so embrace things, and for me it was immediacy, but other principles as well. So become part of your personal life. And I think that's, to your point, Emilio, as well. If you think of like, what are the principles for an event like this? How do you feel these principles? What are we here for? What makes this community? What brings you here? What brings you to talk to your neighbor? Those are the principles that we embrace as part of Burning Man.
Yes, and I asked Patrick yesterday what was the meaning of immediacy, which was a new word to me, and in the last years I have become obsessed with words. And it was very, not only nice, but like reassuring to hear the description that he gave me for immediacy. And what I gather on my mind is that it's something very beautiful because it talks about a state of openness. And I think that's a beautiful state to live in, you know, because when you live in that state, even if it's not permanently, but you know, in certain moments, and the exercise is to, you know, to activate more moments of that openness. I think that is there where life becomes so much more interesting, you know, because instead of like enclosing myself, I am with this disposition to learn. And what can be more important for a young boy or a young adult or a young old man than learning? So I think that your description really helped me to remember that that state of openness is a personal decision.
So I have to tell you, Christopher Breedlove is one of my heroes. Right after Burning Man a few years ago, they found out about the Hurricane Katrina and the devastation in New Orleans and Mississippi, and they thought, we're burners, we know how to do this. They got together and they came out and they helped people. And then they kept doing it, and they created a fantastic organization that's part of the Burning Man called Burners Without Borders. And I think that's a beautiful example of taking principles out into the default world. And did you want to tell people about that?
You know, so you were just speaking about like our foundational moment for Burners Without Borders, and you know, it was at the beginning of our event, and all of a sudden we found out that this hurricane was hitting the Gulf Coast. And so, you know, with these principles, this idea of immediacy, all of a sudden this story immediately went around our community, and people said, we need to do something. And in this idea of radical self-reliance, our community said, well, why not us to show up? And so we had 35 members of our community leave the event and go down to New Orleans, and they ended up spending 9 months there doing demolition work for free, helping this community recover as a gift, which is another one of our principles, which I think for a lot of people down there was a radical idea, that people would just show up and help them do all of this work, because what we were doing was clearing off people's pads so that they could get emergency houses, which is usually something that people are charged for in these areas. And then when we built this camp, also what we decided to do was that in hard places in the world, oftentimes we need hope and art to keep our spirits alive. And so we would decorate our camp like a Christmas or things, or we would have movie nights. We would make sculptures out of the refuse that we would find, and we would burn those together on Saturday night. And these were all ways that we were living our principles in this arena. And so for us, it was this moment where we realized that all of the skills that we'd been building through starting this event called Burning Man were actually immediately applicable in other places in the world, and also that really art was this essential part of helping communities rebuild, because art is what inspires us with hope.
Can I add just a little memory that I have? And it's very simple what I'm going to share with you, but it's funny because even if it's very simple, it really got stuck on my mind. And when we were leaving Burning Man, 1 week after I arrived, we were like for 7 hours almost parked, you know, because we couldn't move, all the lines trying to move, but we couldn't. And we were in the cars, you know, kind of bored, and then a girl, you know, a beautiful woman comes, very happy, between the cars, you know, and she had a great attitude, and she was carrying a little box. And when she came through our car, you know, she just like gets closer and into the window, and she says, "Would you like some frozen grapes?" And it was hot, you know, it was sunny, and it sounded so delicious to have these frozen grapes. And she just handed the box inside, you know, the car, and it was for free. Talking about, you know, gifting, and we were like so thankful for something very insignificant, but in that context and in that moment, it felt delicious. Not just the flavor and the temperature and the sweetness, but the act of giving something without expecting money in exchange. And we were talking in the car, you know, if this was happening outside of Burning Man, probably we wouldn't have accepted. Because we have been, you know, brought up thinking that we have to, you know, like to be like distrustful of people who want to give you things. Since we were kids, you know, don't accept things from people that you don't know. You know, so I think it's a great exercise to rethink a lot of things, but I think that gifting is a magical key to open to amazing relationships.
Well, I think the way you just described that, Emilio, is it's foundational, and the fact that people have an opportunity to practice non-transactional relationships, that there can be the free giving, and that actually leads to a richer exchange and a more self-perpetuating exchange, right? When you are on the receiving end of this, it enables you to open your mind to that non-transactional opportunity for others, which is a teaching and learning experience that goes both directions. So I really appreciate the simple and powerful example of how we don't have to expect things in our interactions to be really receiving a wealth of experience and gifts.
It's funny, one of the things that I found hard my first burn was accepting that people were offering things for free and opening yourself up to that. It's an interesting experience. So participation. We talk about radical participation as one of the principles. So now, guess what? You all get to participate. I have 3x5 cards, and we're going to hand them out. And I'm going to give you homework. So you take the cards, you can talk to your friends, go have a coffee, walk around, think about it, and I want each person to write down, what is a principle that you think volcanoes should have? Write down what the principle should be, define it, maybe how it would manifest here, and when you check in, when you get your lanyards, there's one table for checking in on the day, and there's a plastic box on that counter that says principles. So take a card, think about it, make a suggestion that you think should be a principle for volcano, and leave it there. And we're going to go through them and hopefully put them together tomorrow and be able to group ideas of what the principles are that we can use as we move forward and evolve in volcano. So I'm going to hand these out. Thank you all so much. And thank you so much to these guys who've traveled so far to be here and for keeping Burning Man, Burning Man.